Picture this: a fleet of the most advanced stealth bombers ever built departs from the heart of America under cover of darkness. No announcements, no press briefings, 18 hours of silence over the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and deep into the Middle East, until the sky above Iran lights up with a power the world has rarely witnessed. That is the story of where we are right now. And if you think what happened during Operation Midnight Hammer last June was the end of this story, you haven't been paying attention. Because what the United States is doing to Iran today, right now, as you watch this, makes that first strike look like a warning shot. Welcome to World Brief Daily. If you've been following this channel, you know we don't do surface level. Today, we are going deep into the most significant military campaign the United States has launched in the Middle East since the Iraq War, Operation Epic Fury. We are going to walk through every layer of this conflict: the strikes, the satellite imagery, the ceasefire negotiations, the back-channel surrender signals, and the international coalition now assembling around the Strait of Hormuz. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what is happening, why it matters, and where this is all heading. And if you are new here, subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell, because this story is moving fast, and World Brief Daily is the place to stay ahead of it. Let's get into it. To understand Operation Epic Fury, you have to understand what came before it. On June 21st, 2025, the United States launched Operation Midnight Hammer, a mission that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth described at the time as a strike that involved the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. 7 B-2 stealth bombers departed Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, flew 18 hours across the Atlantic and Mediterranean, and dropped 14 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 30,000 pounds, directly onto Iran's most hardened nuclear sites at Fordo and Natanz. A U.S. submarine simultaneously launched more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Isfahan nuclear complex. According to the Congressional Research Service, the entire strike involved over 125 U.S. aircraft and was executed in roughly 25 minutes. The results were devastating. As President Trump announced that same evening, Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Fordo, buried 80 to 90 meters underground in a mountain, specifically engineered to survive conventional bombing, was struck by 6 B-2s, dropping 6 bombs each directly into its ventilation shafts. The first bombs blew the concrete covers. The next bombs went straight down into the facility itself. The Center for Strategic and International Studies confirmed that these strikes decimated Iran's enrichment facilities at Fordo and Natanz and destroyed Iran's metallurgy research infrastructure at Isfahan. The IAEA had previously assessed that Iran had stockpiled enough uranium to potentially construct 9 nuclear bombs. That capability was now, at a minimum, severely degraded. But here is where the story gets complicated, and here is where it gets significant. In the months that followed Operation Midnight Hammer, open-source satellite intelligence began telling a troubling story. As reported by Silo Breaker, as early as September 2025, Iranian officials were publicly announcing efforts to restore their missile production capacity. Commercial satellite imagery from early 2026 indicated reinforced tunnel systems at Isfahan, hardened access points near Natanz, and additional protective construction at the Parchin military complex. Iran was not surrendering. Iran was rebuilding. Simultaneously, nuclear diplomacy was collapsing. Iran suspended cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency in July 2025. 5 rounds of nuclear talks between Washington and Tehran had failed to deliver any substantive agreement. According to Wikipedia's summary of the conflict timeline, the IAEA reported that Iran had stored highly enriched uranium in an underground facility that had not been damaged by the June 2025 bombings. At his State of the Union address on February 24, 2026, President Trump stood before Congress and declared that Iran had restarted its nuclear program and was developing missiles capable of reaching the American homeland. 3 days later, the bombs started falling again. On February 28, 2026, the United States Central Command in Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, the most significant American military operation in the Middle East since the invasion of Iraq. According to defense analysts at the Hudson Institute, the stated objectives were unambiguous from the first hour: destroy Iran's ballistic missile arsenal and production capacity, annihilate its navy, sever its support for terrorist proxies, and ensure Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. Regime change, while not formally declared, was widely understood as the campaign's ultimate ambition. U.S. Central Command Commander Admiral Brad Cooper described the scale of what was happening in a statement that left no room for misinterpretation. Since the first 24 hours of this campaign, he said, Iranian ballistic missile and drone attacks have dropped drastically. But he was equally clear that the mission was not defensive. Forces executing Operation Epic Fury aren't just defending against Iranian threats. We are methodically dismantling them by hitting Iranian missiles and drones as we also strike their defense industrial base. Just last night, our bomber force hit a large ballistic missile manufacturing facility, methodically dismantling. Those two words are doing a lot of work because what Admiral Cooper described is not a targeted strike campaign. This is systematic destruction, and the satellite imagery confirms it. Let's talk about what those images show because they are extraordinary. First, we have before and after imagery of Iran's Parchin nuclear site, a sprawling compound that housed not just nuclear research facilities, but a cluster of military and missile production infrastructure. The Parchin complex has long been one of Iran's most sensitive military installations. What the satellite imagery shows after Operation Epic Fury strikes is bluntly destruction. Buildings that existed before the campaign simply do not exist after. Multiple structures within the same compound hit with a precision that analysts at CSIS described as remarkable given the complexity of the target environment. In the same area of Parchin, we have before and after imagery of Iran's broader military complex. Numerous buildings heavily damaged or destroyed, and here is the operational detail that is both impressive and sobering. The accuracy of these strikes means that nothing is wasted. The munitions are going precisely to the structures that matter: weapons production buildings, command facilities, storage sites, while adjacent infrastructure is left untouched. That is not accident. That is intent. That is a military telling you exactly how good it is. And then there is the footage of the Iranian Su-22 tactical bomber that left military analysts speechless. The strike, and you have to watch this carefully to understand what it means, went not through the roof of the hardened shelter structure, but through the opening. The opening. The aircraft was inside the structure, partially obscured, and the munition still found its way in through the gap, as if guided by a thread. As Admiral Cooper noted, the U.S. military had every option to go through the roof. The decision not to, the decision to thread a precision weapon through a narrow opening rather than simply obliterating the entire structure, was a demonstration. A very deliberate message about what U.S. precision capabilities now look like in actual combat conditions. This is not Cold War-era blunt force bombing. This is something different. Now, World Brief Daily has been tracking the industrial dimension of this campaign from day one, and this is where Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's statement becomes the most important statement of the entire conflict. Speaking at a press conference, Hegseth said, "Soon and very soon, all of Iran's defense companies will be destroyed." As of 2 days ago, Iran's entire ballistic missile production capacity, every company that builds every component of those missiles, has been functionally defeated, destroyed. Buildings, complexes, and factory lines all across Iran destroyed. We're shooting down and destroying what missiles they still have in stock, but more importantly, ensuring that they have no ability to make more. Let that land for a moment. The goal is not just to destroy the missiles Iran has now. The goal is to destroy Iran's ability to ever make missiles again. That distinction between destroying stockpiles and destroying production capacity is the entire strategic logic of this operation. According to the Hudson Institute's situation report on Operation Epic Fury, by the end of the first 10 days of the campaign, U.S. forces had struck more than 5,000 targets across Iran. That figure includes more than 50 Iranian naval vessels. As CSIS analysis confirmed, General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stated that Iranian theater ballistic missile launches had been reduced by 86% from peak levels, and one-way attack drone intercepts had fallen by 73%. Those numbers reflect not just successful interceptions. They reflect a military machine running out of things to fire because its factories are gone. The cost of this campaign, and this is worth understanding, is staggering on both sides. Expert analysis cited by the Hudson Institute estimated that even the first 100 hours of Operation Epic Fury cost Washington approximately $3.7 billion. And the U.S. military has adapted its approach as the campaign has progressed. According to defense analysts, American forces have shifted from expensive standoff cruise missiles to joint direct attack munitions. JDAMs, which are precision guidance kits converting conventional bombs into GPS-guided weapons. This shift became possible because Israel's earlier air defense suppression campaign in June 2025 had already gutted Iran's integrated air defense network. American aircraft can now fly closer to their targets with dramatically reduced risk. If you are watching this and you haven't subscribed to World Brief Daily yet, this is the moment. This is the most significant military campaign in a generation. We are covering every development, every strike package, every diplomatic signal. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. You do not want to miss what comes next. Now let's talk about the ceasefire signals, because while the bombs are falling, a parallel story is unfolding behind closed doors that is every bit as dramatic as the strikes themselves. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, the same official who just days ago issued a formal apology to Gulf nations for Iranian attacks, only to have Iran's military publicly contradict him and force him to walk it back, has now gone public with his ceasefire demands. After confirming he had spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Pakistan's president, Pezeshkian stated that Iran would only agree to end the conflict if, first, Iran's legitimate rights are recognized, second, Iran receives reparations for war damages, and third, Iran receives guarantees against any future military aggression. This from a government that has lost control of its own airspace. To be clear about what is happening here, the Iranian president's ceasefire demands are maximalist. They are the demands of a party that believes it is negotiating from strength. And yet every piece of military evidence suggests the exact opposite is true. Iran's ballistic missile launches have collapsed. Its navy has been decimated. Its missile factories are rubble. Its air defenses are functionally gone. The gap between the public position and the military reality is extraordinary. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because what Iran is saying in public is apparently very different from what it is offering in private. According to reporting confirmed by the Russian side, in a back-channel conversation that appears to have occurred around or during the call between Pezeshkian and Putin, Russia brought ceasefire prospects to President Trump's attention. And Iran's private offer is significant. Iran is reportedly willing to transfer 400 kilograms of its enriched uranium to Russian custody. This is not an unprecedented arrangement. In 2015, when Iran signed the original JCPOA nuclear deal, Russia took physical custody of a large portion of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile as part of the agreement's verification mechanism, so there is a historical playbook here. And the fact that Iran is now reportedly willing to revisit it after having flatly refused to give up this uranium during pre-war negotiations tells you something important about how Iran's leadership assesses their position. The United States, however, rejected this offer, and the reasoning behind that rejection gets to the heart of why this conflict started in the first place. Iran is willing to give up uranium, but Iran is not willing to give up the centrifuges. It is not willing to dismantle the enrichment infrastructure. It wants to keep the facilities that could, at any future moment of Iran's choosing, produce more enriched uranium. And this is precisely the arrangement the United States and Israel have found unacceptable throughout every round of negotiations. Because here is the technical reality. Iran currently holds uranium enriched to 60% purity. That level of enrichment has no civilian justification. Nuclear power reactors operate on fuel enriched to 3 to 5%. Medical isotope production requires perhaps 20%. 60% enrichment serves exactly one purpose in a national nuclear program. It is a stepping stone to weapons-grade uranium at 90%. The centrifuges do not care about diplomatic promises. You simply run them longer. Iran has already demonstrated willingness to cross enrichment thresholds it previously committed not to cross. That track record makes any arrangement that leaves the enrichment infrastructure intact essentially unverifiable in any meaningful sense. Tehran's offer, surrender the uranium, keep the means of production, is the nuclear equivalent of agreeing to destroy your current stockpile of ammunition while retaining your weapons factory. Washington's answer was no. As CSIS analysts noted, the critical question going forward is whether Iran's nuclear ambitions survive this conflict at all, or whether the systematic destruction of production infrastructure, combined with the collapse of the country's missile forces, changes the strategic calculus of whatever government emerges from this crisis. While those negotiations play out behind closed doors, a new development is reshaping the geography of this conflict. The international coalition now forming around the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is the single most important maritime choke point on the planet. Roughly 20% of global oil trade passes through those 21 miles of water between Iran and Oman. Iran's parliament voted to close it at the outset of Operation Epic Fury. That vote sent oil markets into immediate turbulence. According to Wikipedia's account of the conflict, shipping through the strait slowed to a near standstill, with 150 freight ships, including numerous oil tankers, stalled in the surrounding waters. President Trump addressed this directly in a public statement that was simultaneously a coalition call and a warning. Many countries affected by Iran's attempted closure of the Hormuz Strait will be sending warships in conjunction with the United States to keep the strait open and safe. We have already destroyed 100% of Iran's military capabilities, but it's easy for them to send a drone or two, drop a mine, or deliver a close-range missile somewhere along or in the waterway, no matter how badly they've been defeated. He then called on China, France, Japan, South Korea, the United Kingdom, and other nations to contribute naval assets to protect the strait. The list is notable both for who is on it and for what Trump's framing implies. These are the countries most dependent on Hormuz remaining open. Their economies, their supply chains, their energy security all flow through that narrow strip of water. France's response at the time of this analysis has been cautiously positive. Senior French officials indicated openness to participating in a protective coalition, though a formal decision was still pending. The United Kingdom similarly indicated it was assessing how best to contribute. The E3, the UK, France, and Germany had already resolved to back proportionate military defensive measures against Iranian drones and ballistic missiles, according to reporting on the conflict's diplomatic dimension. That resolution was a significant step toward direct European involvement. Japan and South Korea, both heavily dependent on Gulf oil imports, have strong economic incentives to participate. China's position is the most complex variable. Beijing has deep economic relationships with both Iran and the Gulf states, and it has not, as of this analysis, formally committed to coalition participation, though the economic damage of a prolonged Hormuz closure would cut as deeply into Chinese supply chains as anyone's. While the ceasefire negotiations and coalition diplomacy were developing, U.S. strikes inside Iran were continuing with undiminished intensity. Satellite imagery published in connection with Operation Epic Fury confirmed the complete destruction of an IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, headquarters in the Rabat Karim area near Tehran. The strike was powerful. The before and after contrast is unambiguous. What was a functioning military command facility is now rubble, and the targeting of IRGC command infrastructure is not incidental. It is core to the campaign's design. According to CSIS analysis of the operation, the United States and Israel struck over 2,000 targets in the opening days of Epic Fury. Among those targets were not just missile bases and production facilities. Strikes also hit IRGC leadership infrastructure, base IJ militia facilities, and the command nodes tied to Iran's strategic weapons programs. Hudson Institute analysts assessed that Washington's target list prioritized the elimination of missile launch capabilities, military facilities, and the command networks of the Revolutionary Guard's strategic forces. And then there is the dimension of this conflict that carries perhaps the most human weight. President Trump, in public remarks, addressed the IRGC personnel who participated in the massacre of Iranian protesters. "We have tapes of some of these people that go around shooting the protesters," Trump said. "They're going out and they're shooting protesters for just literally standing, not for doing anything, for standing on the street." He warned these individuals directly. They will face consequences. He referenced the January crackdown in which, according to his statement, 32,000 civilians were killed by Iranian security forces during the regime's suppression of the largest anti-government protests Iran had seen since 1979. According to Wikipedia's account of the 2026 Iran war, tensions between Iran and the United States had been escalating sharply since January 2026, precisely because of those massacres. The Iranian government's brutal response to civilian protests was a key factor in hardening Trump administration resolve toward military action. And the deliberate targeting of IRGC command infrastructure, combined with Trump's public warning to individuals documented on camera shooting protesters, signals a dimension of this campaign that goes beyond pure military objective destruction. This is also accountability. At the Hudson Institute's Situation Report, analysts noted that the IRGC is simultaneously tightening its political grip inside Iran, even as its military capacity is being dismantled from the air. That internal dynamic, the security apparatus becoming more repressive as its external military power collapses, is one of the most dangerous variables of this conflict. Let's now look at where this leaves Iran strategically and why the situation is more precarious than any of Tehran's public statements suggest. At peak intensity during the opening days of Operation Epic Fury, Iran fired hundreds of ballistic missiles and more than 800 drones in the first 48 hours. According to the Defense Update analysis of the conflict, Iranian strikes targeted the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Israel, and U.S. military facilities across the region. Against the Gulf states alone, an estimated 137 missiles and 541 drones hit the UAE, 45 missiles and 9 drones targeted Bahrain, 65 missiles and 12 drones hit Qatar, and 97 missiles and 283 drones struck Kuwait. Those numbers are staggering, and yet the intercept rates have been equally staggering. Israel's multi-layer air defense architecture, Arrow 3, Arrow 2, David Sling, and Iron Dome, achieved intercept rates of approximately 90 to 95%. Gulf state defense networks performed at similarly high rates. The damage done was real in some locations, but the overwhelming majority of Iranian firepower was neutralized before reaching its targets. And now, crucially, that firepower is running out. Iranian theater ballistic missile launches are down 86%. One-way drone attacks are down 73%. The factories that produce those weapons are destroyed. The people in those factories who knew how to build them are gone. The supply chains feeding those facilities have been severed. Iran cannot sustain this rate of expenditure, and it cannot replenish its losses. Iran's naval capacity has been similarly devastated. According to Hudson Institute analysis, the U.S. military struck more than 50 Iranian naval vessels in the opening phase of the campaign. Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping, to enforce any kind of Hormuz closure through naval power, has been dramatically curtailed. The picture that emerges from all of this intelligence is of a regime caught between an impossible public position and a deteriorating military reality. In public, Iran demands reparations and guarantees. In private, it is reportedly offering to hand over its enriched uranium stockpile. Its president apologizes for attacking Gulf neighbors, then walks the apology back under pressure from his own military. Its military fires hundreds of missiles and drones while those same systems are being destroyed faster than they can be replaced. This is a regime under extreme stress. And the question that every analyst in Washington, Jerusalem, Moscow, and Beijing is now trying to answer is, what does that stress produce? The answer to that question will depend significantly on what happens in the next diplomatic window, if one opens. The U.S. position has been consistent throughout this conflict. The objective is to ensure Iran can never acquire a nuclear weapon, cannot rebuild its missile arsenal to threaten American forces and allies, and cannot sustain a regional proxy network that destabilizes the Middle East. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated it simply, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and we will not allow Iran to hide behind the immunity of a massive short-term ballistic missile inventory or the ability to make them or launch them. That is a maximalist objective as well. And that is where the collision course becomes visible. Iran's minimum public position is recognition, reparations, guarantees. America's minimum position is permanent, verifiable elimination of nuclear and missile production capacity. Those two floors do not obviously overlap. What Russia's role in this matters. Putin bringing ceasefire prospects to Trump's attention, Iran's enriched uranium potentially going into Russian custody. These are signals that Moscow sees an opportunity to play mediator to extract diplomatic value from a conflict it did not start and cannot control. Whether that opportunity leads anywhere depends on whether there is a Venn diagram overlap between what Iran is willing to give up privately and what the United States will actually accept. Based on the transcript of Admiral Cooper's public statement, General Kane's comments, and Secretary Hegseth's press conference remarks, Washington's position is that the military campaign will continue until the objectives are achieved. The operation is not, in Hegseth's words, open-ended. But it is also, as he was equally clear, not a constraint on further action if Iran escalates. The Strait of Hormuz remains the global economic wildcard. Every additional day of disruption to tanker traffic through that choke point compounds damage to global oil markets, shipping insurance costs, and the supply chains of every country on Earth with any dependency on Middle Eastern energy. The international coalition Trump is assembling serves two purposes simultaneously. It protects the strait militarily, and it builds the political architecture of shared responsibility for the outcome of this conflict. What we are witnessing right now in real time is a military and geopolitical earthquake whose aftershocks will reshape the Middle East for decades. Operation Epic Fury is not a limited strike. It is a systematic campaign to permanently alter the military balance in the region by dismantling the institutional foundations of Iranian military power, the factories, the command structures, the missile silos, the naval assets, the enrichment facilities. The United States has deployed a level of precision that it has arguably never deployed in a real-world combat environment at this scale. A strike through a hangar opening rather than through the roof. Satellite imagery of craters in neat rows on hardened facilities. Ballistic missile attack volumes down 86% in under 2 weeks. These are not incidental numbers. They represent the cumulative effect of years of preparation of the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, finally used in actual combat for the first time in history, of carrier strike groups repositioned in the Arabian Sea, of allies whose air defense networks were already battle-tested against Iranian munitions in June 2025. And through all of it, the diplomatic signal remains consistent. As General Kane said at the original Midnight Hammer briefing, Iran, in that sense, has a choice. We've made it very clear to them. This is nuclear sites. This is nuclear capabilities. This is the line that the president set. Now is the time to come forward for peace. The question is whether Tehran's leadership, pressed between the maximum pressure of an unprecedented military campaign and the internal pressure of a population that has been rising against them since January, can find a way to that peace on terms the United States will accept. We will be watching every development as it unfolds. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is happening and why it matters, hit the like button right now. It helps World Brief Daily reach more people who need to understand what is happening in the world. Subscribe if you haven't already and turn on notifications, because the next update on this conflict could come at any hour. The world is watching. So are we. Thanks for watching World Brief Daily.